I've given an exclusive interview to Libya 24 on my Foreign Policy Journal article, which came out last week, in which I wrote that could Muammar Gaddafi's son, Saif al-Islam, be the leader that could solve the Libyan crisis? Now, this article has been republished all over the world, in India, in Asia, around in Vietnam. It has been published a number of places in the United States, also in Germany, in Italy. I just gave another interview to an Italian newspaper. And the content of this matter is what is utmost important, because Libya remains a dysfunctional state, largely due to failed American policies in the region. What we saw during the Obama-Clinton administration was that the US solely and only ended up supporting the Sunni Wahhabi, the Saudi Arabian structures and Qatar, and also support, contrary to what most people believe in the West, we supported in the West the Al-Qaeda structures in overthrowing Muammar Gaddafi in Libya and as well in Syria. Now, thanks to WikiLeaks and legal organizations such as Judicial Watch, we are today able to penetrate through some of the deeper layers of the secrecy within the American power structures in such a way that, for example, Judicial Watch came out with the CIA DIA Defense Intelligence report, was retrieved, a report from 2012, in which the DIA, American Defense Intelligence, clearly state which are the groups they support in Syria. This report showed and stated that in Syria, the insurgency is contained and of the Muslim Brotherhood, Salafis, and the Al-Qaeda in Iraq. The ISI was the name used in the 2012 report. The next sentence states that the West supports these opposition groups. So within the American system itself, the kind of documents that were withheld from the American public actually state, and the Obama administration under Hillary Clinton, thus fully aware that those they support in these nations, the insurgencies, is the Al-Qaeda and Salafists. This kind of information is very gross to read when it comes up, so gross that the mainstream Western media does not report on it. It was a puzzle to many of us in 2014. All of the sudden, a new group now, ISIS, comes through the bushes with millions and billions of dollars, American weaponry, hundreds of Toyota pickups, and a lot of destructive news in the Western media that actually have ended up giving the impression to Westerners that all Muslims are barbarians. Just look at ISIL. All Muslims are bad people. Just look at the Middle East. Well, the truth of the matter is that it is we in the West who are fueling the problems in the Middle East. It is we who are using our military complex in order for us to gain billions and billions of dollars on other people's miseries. This is a 100% contrary to the narrative of the West, in which we state that we are democratic, that we have human rights, and that we respect human value. We so do the 100% opposite. And this is relieved and shown through reports such as the DIA report from 2012. In the same report, the Americans also suggested we, the Americans, could also support a coming Islamic State through the Al-Qaeda in Iraq that could be funded in the northeastern part of Iraq that could end up taking away Assad. Disregarding the politics in the region and who is in power or not in power in a particular country, to see with your own eyes that the CIA and the DIA actually engage in such material to the point that 2 years later, when the ISIS came to surface, we saw how they so strangely had instant access to all world-leading media. We saw the pictures in all the papers, well-staged photographs of this terror group that now came, but nobody spoke about how we in the West welcomed this to happen. So when returning to the issue of Libya, it's a very large and maybe one of the largest problems we face in the Western media today, is that the Western narrative reflects almost solely the Sunni, Wahhabi, Al-Qaeda narrative and way of understanding life in the geopolitical struggles in the Middle East. This is understandable why this happened, because the United States is very close to Saudi Arabia. It is easy for the Saudis to whisper whichever narrative they want to the Americans. Plus, the Americans greatly benefit from the wars in this region. Plus, the Americans are very stern friends of the Muslim Brotherhood, which they proved when they overthrew Mubarak and helped the Muslim Brotherhood gain power in the so-called Arab Spring, which profoundly turned into an Arab winter, also 2010, 2011 and onward. We know that when Hillary Clinton later returned to Egypt, she was booed off the stage and they told her to leave the country. And luckily, at least there is some peace in Egypt at the moment under General Sisi. But these issues are dire also because Hillary Clinton's connection to the Qataris in the 2011 war against Libya, it also speak for themselves. Millions of dollars were placed from the Qataris and the Saudis and from Norway. These three countries were the countries that have mostly benefited as foreign states into the Clinton Foundation. And this money went into her foundation as she was forging the war in Libya, which also WikiLeaks has shown us clearly was the case. So, the situation in Libya prior to 2011 was as such that Muammar Gaddafi had opened the country. From 2003, worked very closely with the CIA in eradicating and finding the Al-Qaeda groups there. Gaddafi was a sworn enemy of the Al-Qaeda, so then you can begin and see the picture why it was so vital for the Al-Qaeda and the Saudi fractions to remove him out of power. Please remember that Libya in 2011 was the richest country in Africa. It was a socialist welfare state where every family upon marrying received around 50,000 US dollars as a bonus or benefit from the state. There was a free education system both for men and women. The literacy rate under Muammar Gaddafi went from 10% to 90%. There were huge building projects all over Libya that took several million out of poverty line and moved them into proper housing. For example, the large housing projects that Saif al-Islam led in the Benghazi area. There was a de-arming of Libya after 2003 and onward, as Gaddafi wanted to get closer to the West. Many of his thoughts on that largely also came from Saif al-Islam Gaddafi, who was educated at the London School of Economics in the UK. And we see how the democratization process, the process towards a freer press, the fixing of the Lockerbie scandal with large amounts paid to the families of the victims, the closing down of that case, the removing of the nuclear arsenal, a lot of these issues were happening. And as so many have stated, I could name names from within the CIA, the DIA, the intelligence community, and also from the diplomatic corps in the US. Even President Bush stated that what had happened in Libya was a great happening under Muammar Gaddafi. So this rich state was blown to pieces and completely destroyed by the unlawful, breaching completely international law, breaching the Geneva Conventions that we in the West so proudly speak about, breaching the national sovereignty of nations, believing in lies instigated from certain environments in the Middle East. This is how the no-fly zone in Libya was implemented, and the NATO-backed military coup in that nation was formed in 2011. Now we can remember that Gaddafi was not an innocent man. He was a state leader who had done his mistakes. Some had reason for grievances, but you cannot deny that everyone in Libya, in Africa's richest state, had a job at that time. Everybody had free education. Today, many Libyans wish to return to that state. This is why the now freed from prison Saif al-Islam Gaddafi has united the Libyan tribal leaders behind him in an effort of national reconciliation to take power in Libya, if possible, supported by President Trump in the United States, and also a great friend of the Libyan people, the Russians, for whom for so long have worked to help many of the groups in the Middle East, the moderate Muslim groups, so that one may achieve peace and stability in that region again. So thanks to our Russian friends for their efforts in the Middle East to create peace. But there is a wonderful thing that has happened in the United States as President Trump has taken power, who is a man who seems to, we shall see whether this comes to pass, but judging from what he has stated, he wishes to ban and put back on the terror list the Muslim Brotherhood. It was upon his property that Muammar Gaddafi placed his tent when he was in the United States. And we have heard how the President Trump states that it was a mistake, a grave mistake to take out Muammar Gaddafi, and that Libya would be 100% better country if Gaddafi was still in power. So there is a complete new sentiment in the West, away from the authoritarian system in the United States under the Obama-Clinton administration, and as well away from some of the totalitarianism we have seen for so long in the Western media, in the chronic only explaining the Middle East from the Saudi, the Sunni extremist, and the Al-Qaeda perspective. Now we see voices in the West that speak up and wish for peace in the Middle East. We believe, I am part of a European group that also have wide connections in the United States, that believe that we shall not remain silent on the Libyan issue. We shall follow those intellectuals who have gone before us, and we shall not remain silent about this injustice done at the heart of our own culture and by our own corrupted political leaders. We shall speak up, also because it is vital to achieve justice between the nations in the world. If one is to rule them all, and that one rules in injustice and lack of respect for his fellow human man and human beings, we will have a situation in the world upon which God the Almighty does not look upon us with pleasure and will not bless us anymore. And this is a dire problem in the West. The decadence and the lack of respect for international law has to come to an end. Now, regarding Libya, there is a golden chance as the popular movement of the Liberation Front of Libya, this document was signed late in December 2016, now has united the tribes of Libya behind Saif al-Islam Gaddafi, who proved before the 2011 war how willing he was to liberalize the economy, to give justice to political prisoners, to help the Libyan people prospect of better living conditions by large housing projects. He was leading and heading the charities to help the poor children of Africa. And as Africans, I am also an African, born and raised in Africa. We heard all the stories about how Muammar Gaddafi was willing to support an African Union under an African currency to achieve the freedom from what was perceived as the injustice of the Western system, of the World Bank, the IMF, the petrodollar, all these things. I shall not go into details around that, but many state that this was the main reason for the war in Libya, to be able to stop Muammar Gaddafi in liberating the African nations and forming a new United Nations. This was the plan that was not under Western rule. But we see today, in other words, how Saif al-Islam Gaddafi in his past has proven his ability to lead that country, to liberalize and to bring democracy. He has proven in the past how he cares about the Libyan people and how he wants to build Libya as a nation. And we know now that he has the tribes behind him in this joint effort to take power in Libya. And this is a problem for some of the generals and other political Western-backed leaders today, because if you do not have the support of the Libyan people and the Libyan tribes, how will you unify and how will you be able to rule that country? So it will be interesting in the months to come to follow the situation in Libya and to see whether the Western powers understand that it is in their gain to get peace in Libya. Just one example. Remember how millions upon millions now travel through the ISIS-controlled shores of northern Libya and access by boats over to Italy, creating enormous amounts of problems for Italy and Europe as a whole. Under Muammar Gaddafi, this illegal immigration did not even happen, as Italy had an agreement with Gaddafi, so that Gaddafi controlled this mostly economic seeking opportunity, millions of Africans that wanted to enter illegally into Europe. Among them, we also hear, of course, are the numerous reports now of jihadists and Sunni Wahhabis and Al-Qaeda members and you know, these terror groups. They shift name every 3rd-4th year. It's called something else. Mainly when you look into it, it's just new names coming up here and there. Mainly it's some of the same fractions that are the issue the whole time. We see how it would greatly benefit Europe to achieve peace by instating or supporting Saif al-Islam's effort in Libya at the moment. It could bring an end to the immigration crisis of illegal immigration into Europe, which a country like Italy would benefit greatly from this. So let us join in the effort of breaking away from the deadlock of only reading the mainstream media and their one-sided Sunni Wahhabi Al-Qaeda portrayal of what is happening in the Middle East. Let us report more honestly, read other news articles, read from other sources that are not that connected to the Sunni extremist worldview that we are chronically portrayed and shown, glorifying the Arab Spring, for example, which was an Islamist movement, glorifying only the Saudi Arabia and those particular elements. Let's now open our minds and see that the Middle East is full of moderate Muslims that we have crushed through choosing the wrong allies in the Middle East the past years. Let us now team up with moderate Muslims and create more justice in the Middle East.